All right, let's dive into Etsy. I bet you're wondering, is Etsy just another online store, or is it something different? Well, that's what we're going to unpack today.
Sounds good to me.
We've got this awesome guide that you sent over, and we even did some browsing on the Etsy website to really see what's going on.
Cool.
This deep dive isn't just for people thinking about selling on Etsy, though.
Yeah.
Maybe you love shopping on Etsy, but you want to know how to get the best deals.
Yeah.
Or you just want to peek behind the curtain and see how it all works. Whatever your reason, we'll cover how Etsy actually works, what to watch out for, whether you're buying or selling.
Right.
And, at the end of the day, how to make smart decisions on Etsy. We're your Etsy Sherpas.
I like that.
So we've got our online marketplace expert here to break it all down. What's the first thing that pops into your head when you think about Etsy? How is it different from just throwing something up on eBay?
Well, what's really cool about Etsy is they're super focused on handmade stuff, vintage stuff, and craft supplies. It's kind of like a paradise for artists, people who collect things, and anyone who loves DIY projects.
Okay, so you're not going to find a bunch of mass-produced items there.
Exactly. You won't see that on Etsy. It's all about those one-of-a-kind pieces. And this guide we have, it does a really great job of explaining that.
So the guide starts with the basics.
Yeah, it kind of lays out what Etsy's all about. It talks about those three main categories, handmade, vintage, and craft supplies.
Right. Most people kind of get that part, but what's interesting about it...
Even when it's talking about the basics, the guide points out that each category has, its own set of rules. Vintage items have to be at least 20 years old.
So there are rules to the game.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's all to keep things fair and make sure Etsy stays special,
Okay, so there are ground rules, even if you think you're an Etsy pro. What else is in this guide?
So from there, it jumps into how buying and selling on Etsy actually work. It's like a behind-the-scenes look at how everything happens, how the money part is handled safely.
Through Etsy payments, right?
Yeah, exactly. And how Etsy supports both buyers and sellers.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
They take care of all the money stuff, unlike if you just set up your own shop on your own website. I bet that's super helpful for someone just starting out.
Oh, for sure. It definitely makes things easier. But that's not all the guide talks about, It actually spends a lot of time explaining all the ways you can earn money on Etsy.
Okay, so we're not just talking about selling your own stuff.
No, not at all. Of course, selling is a big part of it, but it also covers stuff like affiliate marketing and some other out-of-the-box ways to make money.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Multiple ways to play the Etsy game, huh?
Definitely. Lots of possibilities.
But before we get to all the making money stuff, we should probably talk about the good and the bad sides of Etsy.
Absolutely. And that's another thing the guide does well. It lays out all the advantages and the disadvantages of choosing Etsy as your platform.
So hit me with the good stuff first. What are some of the perks of going with Etsy?
Well, one of the biggest pros is that Etsy's global.
Yeah.
You're connecting with millions of potential customers from all over the world.
Whoa, so it's not just your local craft fair.
Not even close.
Yeah.
And since it's a niche marketplace, it attracts people who are really looking for unique and handmade goods.
So you're kind of tapping into a specific audience.
Right. People who appreciate things that are handmade and one of a kind. Plus, Etsy has all these tools for seller stuff to analyze your sales, market your products, and make running your business easier.
All right, so far so good. But you mentioned there are some downsides too. Got to keep it real, right? What are some of the challenges that Etsy sellers might face?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is competition. Etsy's so popular that there are a lot of sellers in almost every niche.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a challenge.
It means you really need to have a good plan to stand out,
Yeah.
And then there are the fees, of course. Like with any business, there are costs involved.
Right, you got to pay to play.
Exactly. Etsy charges fees for listing your items, fees for each transaction, and fees for processing payments. You got to make sure you're factoring all that into your pricing.
Yeah, you don't want to end up losing money.
And then there are Etsy's policies, which can be pretty strict. I've heard some stories about sellers getting in trouble for not following the rules exactly.
Uh-oh. Sounds like you have to walk a fine line there.
Yeah, the guide really stresses how important it is to understand Etsy's rules and stick to them, especially when it comes to the whole handmade and vintage thing.
So you got to play by the rules and keep your customers happy.
Exactly. You got to build a good reputation. It's all about getting those good reviews and providing excellent customer service,
Okay, so those are the key things to remember.
Yeah.
Now, before we jump into all the different ways you can make money on Etsy, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Etsy website itself. I got to say, it's a pretty nice looking website.
Yeah, it's really visually appealing.
Lots of cool photos and those tempting promotions.
Totally. And that's all part of Etsy's plan, you know?
So it's all strategic.
Definitely. They've designed the website to be really easy to use and super engaging. Like, it just pulls you in and makes you want to keep browsing.
I totally get that. Those early Cyber Deals banners almost got me to buy a hand-knitted alpaca scarf. But beyond the pretty pictures, how does the website help someone find what they're looking for? It's a massive marketplace, and it could be overwhelming for someone just starting out.
It's true, there's a ton of stuff on Etsy, but they do a great job of categorizing everything. You can browse by category, like jewelry, clothing, home decor, or art, which makes it easy to find what you're looking for.
Oh yeah, those categories are super helpful.
And if you're just looking for inspiration, they have these curated collections
like editor's picks or shop the look.
Exactly. They're really great for introducing you to new shops and styles you might not have found otherwise.
Okay, so the site is visually appealing and well organized. What else jumped out at you?
They really highlight their commitment to independent creators, sustainability, and, having a positive impact on the community. If you go to the About section, you'll see it front and center. They want people to know that's important to them.
Right, so it's not just about buying stuff. It's about supporting a certain set of values.
Yeah, I think that resonates with a lot of Etsy shoppers these days.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about what Etsy is, how it works, and some of the pros and cons.
We sure have.
But of course, the big question is, how do you actually make money on Etsy? And lucky for us, this guide is packed with info on exactly that.
Oh, it's a gold mine. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of setting up a shop, creating awesome products, mastering SEO, and even explore those other income streams you mentioned.
Sounds like a plan. But before we go there, I think it's worth comparing Etsy to some of its competitors. Where does it fit into the whole online marketplace landscape?
That's a great point. And the guide actually talks about that too. It mentions Amazon Handmade and Shopify as alternatives.
Yeah, those are the big ones. So how does Etsy stack up against those guys?
Well, each platform has its own strengths and weaknesses. The best choice really depends on what you're selling and what your goals are.
Gotcha. So tell me about Amazon Handmade. I mean, it's part of Amazon, so it must have some advantages, right?
Oh, definitely. Amazon Handmade has a massive reach, and buyers are already familiar with how Amazon works.
So if you're someone who already shops on Amazon, it might seem natural to sell there, too.
Exactly. But there's a trade-off.
There's always a trade-off.
Amazon Handmade has stricter rules for sellers, and the fees can be higher than Etsy's. Plus, you're not just competing against other handmade and vintage sellers, you're up against, everything on Amazon.
So it's like a much bigger pond.
Right, and it can be tougher to stand out.
Okay, what about Shopify? I've heard a lot of buzz about that one too.
Yeah, Shopify is a really powerful platform. It gives you a lot more control over, the design and functionality of your online store.
And really make it your own.
Exactly. It's great for people who are, tech savvy and have a very specific vision for their brand.
So it's for those who are comfortable getting a little more hands-on.
Right. But the downside is that Shopify takes more technical know-how, and there's definitely more upfront investment. You're basically building your website from scratch. You got to set up the payment processing, handle your own marketing.
So it's more DIY, which can be awesome for some people, but totally intimidating for others.
For sure.
Well, today we're focusing on Etsy, and this guide we have is the ultimate cheat sheet for success on the platform.
Oh, yeah. We're going to unpack everything from finding your niche to creating killer product listings, mastering Etsy's SEO, and even building a loyal customer base.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Now, I'm super interested in the whole product creation thing.
It's definitely a crucial part.
The guide makes it clear that it's not just about making stuff. It's about making the right stuff.
Absolutely. You got to make things people actually want to buy.
Right. Otherwise, you're just stuck with a bunch of, crafts cluttering up your house.
Exactly. And that's where the guide dives deep into product research. It teaches you how to use Etsy's search bar, trend reports.
They have trend reports.
Oh, yeah. And even third-party tools to figure out what people are searching for and what's hot right now. It even recommends, checking out your competition and using Google Trends to understand what people are interested in.
Wow. So it's like a mix of creativity and data analysis. That's cool. What are some of the most important things you picked up from the guide about creating products? Anything really stick out to you?
One thing that really resonated with me is the idea of solving a problem or meeting a need with your products. It's not enough to just make something pretty. It needs to have a purpose.
So it's got to be both beautiful and functional.
Yeah, it needs to have a value proposition, something that makes people go, I need that.
Okay, so you're finding that sweet spot where creativity meets practicality.
Right. And the guide also talks about the importance of figuring out what makes your products unique.
Right. What's your unique selling proposition? What makes you stand out?
Exactly. What story are you telling with your products? What emotions do they evoke? You need to find a way to stand out from the crowd.
I like that. It's about offering something truly special, something that people can't find anywhere else.
Exactly. And another really smart tip from the guide is to test your product ideas before you go all in. Make a few prototypes, get feedback from people.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And refine your designs based on what you learn. That way you minimize the risk of, creating a bunch of stuff that nobody wants.
Makes total sense. It's like test the waters before you jump in head first. All right, so we've got some great insights on creating products that people actually want. But what happens once we have those awesome products ready to go? How do we navigate all those Etsy policies, fees, and all those behind-the-scenes details?
Well, that's where the guide really shines. It's like a survival guide for Etsy. It has a whole section dedicated to understanding all those policies and making sure you're playing by the rules.
I bet that's super important.
It is. And it also talks about handling disputes professionally, building a good reputation, and basically setting yourself up for long-term success on Etsy.
Okay, so it's about the long game, not just a quick buck.
Exactly. And what I really liked is that the guide emphasizes being proactive. Don't wait for problems to pop up. Try to anticipate them and have solutions ready to go.
So you're always one step ahead.
Right. And it stresses that you need to keep learning, stay up to date on any policy changes, do your research on market trends, and connect with other Etsy sellers.
So it's like being a student of the Etsy game, always learning and adapting.
Totally. And a big part of that is building a loyal customer base. The guide gives you tips on providing amazing customer service, adding personal touches, and creating promotions that encourage people to come back and buy from you again.
Right. You want to turn those one-time buyers into fans.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really curious about those Etsy success stories that the guide talks about. It's always inspiring to hear about people who are killing it on Etsy.
Oh, for sure. The guide has several examples. There's this jewelry maker who built a 6-figure business just by specializing in custom designs.
Whoa, 6 figures. That's impressive.
Right. And there's another one about a shop owner who sells printables and totally blew up their business using social media.
So it's totally possible to make Etsy dreams come true. I'm really interested to hear more about those success stories and the lessons we can learn from them.
We'll definitely unpack those in more detail as we go deeper into our Etsy deep dive.
Sweet. #TTS The Deep Dive episode 2024-11-19, part 2 of 3.
But first, let's tackle this whole Etsy SEO thing.
Yeah, that's a big one. You feel kind of mysterious.
It's true. It's how do you get your product seen amongst millions of others?
Right. It's a crowded marketplace.
It is, but the guide actually does a really good job of explaining it. It breaks it down in a way that makes it feel doable. It all starts with understanding how Etsy's search algorithm works. What makes some listings show up higher in the search results than others.
Okay, so it's like cracking the code.
Exactly. And keywords are a huge part of that code. Those are the words and phrases that shoppers type in when they're looking for something specific on Etsy.
Right. I get that keywords are important, but how do you even know which keywords to use? There are a million possibilities.
Don't worry. The guide walks you through it. There are actually a few different ways to do keyword research. You can start with the most obvious one using Etsy's search bar. As you start typing in a word or a phrase, Etsy will suggest autocomplete options.
Oh, like those drop-down suggestions.
Exactly. Those are based on what real shoppers are searching for, so it's a great way to get some initial ideas.
So you're kind of spying on what people want.
In a way, yeah. It's a sneaky way to get some market research. The guide also suggests looking at Etsy's different categories and subcategories. Pay close attention to the words they use, because those are often the same terms shoppers are using.
That makes sense. You're using Etsy's own system to understand their search logic.
Exactly. But once you've got some basic keyword ideas, the guide recommends using more advanced tools to really dig deeper.
Oh, what kind of tools?
Well, there are general keyword research tools like Google Keyword Planner or Ahrefs, but there are also some tools that are specifically designed for Etsy, like eRank and Marmalade.
So you can get really specific with your research.
Yeah. These tools can tell you things like how often people are searching for a particular keyword, how much competition there is, and even suggest other related terms you might not have thought of. You can get really granular with your strategy.
Wow, it's like becoming an Etsy keyword detective. But once you have all these great keywords, what do you do with them? Where do they actually go on your listings?
Well, you don't just throw them in randomly. The guide explains that there are specific places where keywords have the biggest impact. Your product titles are like prime real estate.
So that's the first thing people see.
Exactly. Your title needs to be clear, concise, and packed with relevant keywords. It's like writing a headline that grabs people's attention and tells Etsy exactly what your product is.
Okay, so it's got to be both catchy and informative.
Right. It's a balancing act. And then your product descriptions are where you can go into more detail. This is where you weave those keywords naturally into a compelling story that highlights like the features, benefits, and unique qualities of your product.
So it's not just a list of keywords, it's like telling a story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to entice people to buy, not just stuff keywords in there. And don't forget about tags. Etsy lets you add up to 13 tags to each listing, and those tags act like extra keywords.
Okay, so more keywords.
Yeah. The guide recommends thinking outside the box with your tags, too. Use synonyms, variations of phrases, and even broader terms that relate to your product or how it might be used. You want to cast a wide net and capture as much relevant search traffic as possible.
Okay, so tags are like extra bait for the Etsy algorithm. But keywords aren't the only thing that matters for SEO, right?
Nope. There's more to it.
The guide mentions other things that affect how your listings show up in search.
Yeah, like product categorization is super important. You got to make sure you're putting your product in the most relevant categories and subcategories. That helps people find your stuff when they're browsing those specific sections on Etsy.
So it's like putting your products on the right shelf in a store so people can easily find them.
Exactly. And then there are product attributes. Those are the details about your product, like the size, color, material, style, things like that. The more attributes you fill out, the better. Etsy's algorithm loves details. It helps match your listings with shoppers who are looking for those specific things.
Okay, so it's like you're giving the algorithm more clues to work with.
Exactly. And then there's one more super important element that we haven't talked about yet, product photography.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right?
Totally. Your photos are the first thing people see, and they can make or break a sale. I know I've been guilty of scrolling past listings just because the photos were bad.
Same here. Like, if a photo is blurry or poorly lit, I just assume the product is going to be low quality.
Right. And that's why the guide stresses how important it is to have high quality, well-lit photos that showcase your products in the best possible way. Natural lighting is always best if you can swing it, and make sure you choose backgrounds that complement your products.
So it's like setting the stage for your product.
Exactly. And take multiple photos from different angles and some close-ups too, so people can really see all the details.
Okay, so it's about making your products look irresistible. Does the guide talk about any of the technical stuff like image size and file format?
Oh yeah. Etsy has specific requirements for that stuff, so make sure you're following their guidelines. And don't forget about alt text.
Alt text.
Yeah, it's like a little description that you add to your images. It helps search engines understand what's in the photo. It's good for SEO, and it also makes your listings accessible to people who might have trouble seeing.
Okay, so it's like you're describing the picture for someone who can't see it.
Exactly. So you're thinking about both the visual appeal and the technical side of things.
Got it. Now, we've been talking about individual listings, but what about your whole Etsy shop? Does the guide have any advice on like optimizing your entire shop for SEO?
It does. The About section is super important. That's where you tell your brand story, connect with shoppers on a personal level, and here's the SEO trick. You sprinkle in some relevant keywords that Etsy's algorithm will pick up on.
So it's not just about being charming, it's a strategic move too.
Exactly. And make sure your shop policies are crystal clear.
So there's no confusion for buyers.
Exactly. It builds trust and helps avoid problems down the road. And don't underestimate the power of shop sections.
Oh yeah, those are the categories used to organize your products within your shop, right?
You got it. Shop sections help shoppers navigate your products. And you can use keywords in those section titles to give your shop an extra SEO boost.
It's all about making your shop user-friendly and search engine-friendly.
You got it. But remember, Etsy SEO is not just about tricks and hacks. It's also about building relationships.
Okay, so it's human too.
Totally. Engage with your customers, answer their questions, respond to reviews, and just provide amazing customer service.
So you're building a community.
Exactly. The more you connect with the Etsy community, the stronger your presence on the platform will become.
Makes sense. It's like you're weaving a web, connecting with people and the algorithm at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Etsy SEO is an ongoing thing. It's a combination of being creative, having a plan, and putting in the work consistently.
Right. It's not a one and done kind of thing.
Definitely not. You need to be willing to experiment, track your results, and see what works best for you. There's no magic formula that's going to work for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about creating products people want, optimizing our listings for search, and building relationships with buyers. But how do you actually turn all that into a successful Etsy business, something that's sustainable?
Right. How do you make it last? Well, the guide dives into that too. It talks about building a brand, marketing your products, and all those other things that go into running a business.
It's like taking it to the next level.
It is. And the guide stresses that building a thriving Etsy business goes way beyond just making individual sales.
So it's bigger than that.
Oh, yeah. It's about creating a brand that resonates with people. It's about fostering a community. It's about treating your Etsy shop like a real business, something that you're in for the long haul.
Okay, so you're not just setting up shop, you're building something.
Exactly. And the first step, according to the guide, is understanding your target audience. Who are the people who are most likely to love your products?
Makes sense. Figure out who you're making stuff for.
Right. What are their needs, their desires, their aspirations? Once you understand who your ideal customer is, you can tailor your products, your branding, your marketing, everything to appeal to them.
Okay, so it's like creating a customer profile in your head.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And once you know who you're creating for, the guide walks you through how to build a brand that speaks directly to them.
Okay, so how do you do that? How do you create a brand that people connect with?
Well, it starts with choosing a memorable shop name, something that reflects your products and your personality. Then you need a logo and a banner that visually represent your brand.
So it's about creating a look and feel, like a vibe.
Totally. Think about the colors, the fonts, the imagery you use.
They all work together, right?
Exactly. You want to create a consistent and appealing aesthetic that people will recognize. And that goes for your product photos, your packaging, everything.
It's like creating a mini universe for your brand.
I love that. And then beyond the visuals, the guide talks about the practical stuff too.
Oh, like what?
Like having clear and concise shop policies, things like shipping, returns, and how you handle custom orders.
That's important. No one wants to be surprised by hidden fees or confusing return policies.
Exactly. It's about setting expectations and building trust with your customers. It's also about protecting yourself and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, so you're setting some ground rules in a way that's fair for everyone. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Pricing. How do you decide how much to charge for your products on Etsy?
Pricing is definitely one of the trickiest parts of running an Etsy business.
Right. You don't want to price yourself out of the market, but you also want to make a profit.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And that's where the guide gives some really solid advice. It tells you to start by calculating all your costs.
So like the cost of materials, the time it takes you to make something.
Yep. All of that. Plus Etsy's fees, shipping costs, you got to factor everything in. Then on top of that, you add a markup to make sure you're actually making money.
Okay, so it's about knowing your numbers inside and out. But how do you know if your prices are competitive? Do you just creep on your competitors and see what they're charging?
Well, competitor research is definitely a good idea. It gives you a sense of what the market is like, what people are willing to pay. But pricing is not a one-size-fits-all thing. You also need to consider the perceived value of your products.
Right. Are you using high-quality materials? Is your craftsmanship really good?
Exactly. And the guide also suggests experimenting with different pricing strategies.
Like what?
Well, you could offer discounts for bulk orders or run sales and promotions to attract new customers. It's about finding what works best for you and your business.
So it's about being flexible and testing things out.
Totally. Now, once you've got your prices figured out, it's time to start spreading the word about your awesome Etsy shop. The guide talks a lot about marketing strategies.
Okay, let's hear it. How do we get people to notice our shops?
Well, Etsy itself offers some great marketing tools. There's Etsy ads, where you can pay to have your listings show up when people search for certain keywords. And then there are promoted listings, where you can pay to have your listings appear higher in search results.
So you're basically paying to get more visibility.
Right. It can be a really effective way to get your products seen by more people. But the guide also emphasizes that you shouldn't just rely on Etsy's own tools. Social media is huge. Platforms like Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook are amazing for reaching a wider audience and building a community around your brand.
Okay, so social media is a must-do for Etsy sellers.
Pretty much. Get creative, share behind-the-scenes peeks of your process, host giveaways, collaborate with other creators, make it fun and engaging for your followers.
So you're not just posting product photos, you're creating a whole experience.
Exactly. And then there's email marketing.
Ah, good old-fashioned email.
The guide says it's really important to collect email addresses from people who are interested in your products. That way you can stay in touch, let them know about new stuff, offer special discounts, and just build those relationships over time.
Yeah, it's a way to stay top of mind.
Right, exactly. It's a more personal way to connect with your audience. But marketing is just one piece of the puzzle. You also need to think about the nuts and bolts of running your Etsy business. Things like managing your inventory and providing good customer service.
Right, those things are important.
Oh, they're crucial. And the guide dives into all that stuff too. Like with inventory, it talks about tracking your sales data, analyzing trends, and planning accordingly so you don't end up with a ton of unsold inventory or, run out of your best-selling items.
That makes sense. You got to be organized.
Right. And if you're short on storage space or you're making things to order, the guide suggests offering pre-orders or made-to-order options. That way you're only making what people have already committed to buying.
Ah, so it's like a more sustainable approach to production.
Exactly. You're not wasting materials or creating excess inventory.
Smart. What about customer service? Any tips on that front?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. The guide really stresses the importance of providing stellar customer service. Answer questions quickly, address any issues professionally, and just go above and beyond to make people feel valued.
It's all about those good vibes.
Totally. Happy customers leave good reviews, and good reviews attract more customers. It's a win-win.
Okay, so it's about treating your customers like gold. Now, as our Etsy businesses grow, I could see things getting kind of overwhelming, suddenly you're juggling a ton of orders and tasks. Does the guide offer any advice on managing that growth and potentially even expanding your operations?
It does. The guide suggests that as your business starts to pick up, you might want to think about delegating tasks or even outsourcing certain parts of your business.
Ah, so it's like building a team.
Yeah. Maybe hire a virtual assistant to help with customer service, partner with a fulfillment service to handle packaging and shipping, or even collaborate with other artists or craftspeople to offer a wider range of products.
Okay, so it's about getting help when you need it. Don't be afraid to reach out and delegate. Now, we've covered a ton of ground in this Etsy business deep dive. We've talked about everything from finding your niche and creating awesome products to mastering SEO and building a brand. Phew. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but the guide emphasizes that running an Etsy business is more than just a bunch of tasks you check off a list. It's a way of thinking, a way of approaching business, and creativity.
Yeah, it's a mindset. So what's the main takeaway you hope listeners will get from all of this?
I hope this deep dive has shown people that there's so much potential with Etsy.
It's possible to build a real business on there.
Absolutely. It's not just a hobby site. It's a platform where you can turn your creative dreams into a reality. And the guide, it just gives you a roadmap for how to do that successfully.
Awesome. Hashtag TTS, the deep dive episode 2024-11-19, part 3 of 3.
It really does. But, even with all the info in the guide, there's always more to learn. Etsy's always changing. So how do we keep up and make sure our businesses can thrive in the long run?
Right. What works today might not work tomorrow. What can we do to stay ahead of the game? Any advice beyond what we've talked about already?
Well, one of the best things you can do is connect with other Etsy sellers.
Oh, yeah, like a support group.
Kinda. There are so many resources out there, online forums, social media groups, even in-person meetups.
Right, where Etsy sellers can connect and share tips.
Exactly. It's a great way to learn from each other's experiences and stay up to date on what's working.
It's like having a network of mentors.
Totally. You mentioned online forums, and Etsy actually has its own forum that's really active.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, people are constantly posting in there about everything from SEO and product photography to dealing with customer service issues.
I bet those forums can get kind of overwhelming, though. There's probably a ton of information.
It can be a lot, but you can use the search bar to find specific topics. Chances are, if you're struggling with something, someone else has already asked about it.
Ah, so it's like a searchable database of Etsy knowledge.
Pretty much. And even just browsing through the forums can spark some new ideas.
I like that. What about social media? Are there any groups or communities there that you recommend?
Oh, tons. There are Facebook groups specifically for Etsy sellers, sometimes even organized by what you sell.
So like a group for jewelry makers, a group for vintage clothing sellers, and so on.
Exactly. It's a great way to connect with people in your niche.
Right. You can share tips, get feedback on your products, see what other people are doing.
And don't forget about using social media for market research. Follow hashtags related to what you sell.
So you can see what's trending.
Yeah. You can get a sense of what people are interested in, what kind of products are getting shared, what keywords they're using.
So you're basically spying on the market. In a good way, of course.
Totally. It's like having your finger on the pulse of what's happening on Etsy.
Okay, so we've got online forums and social media groups. Are there any in-person resources that might be helpful for Etsy sellers?
Definitely. A lot of cities have craft markets or fairs where Etsy sellers can sell their products in person.
Right, so you can connect with buyers face-to-face.
Yeah, it's a great way to build relationships and get direct feedback on your stuff. And don't forget about workshops and conferences. There are events specifically for Etsy sellers covering all kinds of topics: SEO, photography, marketing, business strategy, you name it.
So you can learn from the experts.
Exactly. And beyond Etsy-specific resources, there's a whole world of information out there about running an online business and marketing.
Yeah, there are so many podcasts and blogs these days.
Right. There's a ton of valuable information out there. It's just a matter of finding what's relevant to you.
Okay, but that's the challenge, right? How do we filter through all this information and figure out what's actually useful for our businesses?
I think it's about being strategic.
So don't just consume everything.
Exactly. Figure out what your biggest challenges are right now, and then seek out resources that address those specific things.
Right. So if you're struggling with SEO, focus on learning about SEO. If you're ready to hire some help and scale your business, then look for information about that.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment and try different approaches to see what works best for you. There's no one right answer for everyone.
That's a good point. You got to figure out what works for your business.
Totally.
But beyond those external resources, I think it's important to remember that Etsy itself provides a lot of data that can help us improve.
Oh, absolutely. The analytics dashboard on Etsy is like a goldmine. It tells you everything about your shop's traffic, your sales, who your customers are. It's amazing.
Whoa, so it's like having a personal business advisor built into Etsy.
Kinda. You can see what products are selling well, what keywords are bringing people to your shop, where your customers are located. It's really powerful stuff.
So you can use that data to make smarter decisions about your business.
Exactly. It's about being data-driven. You know? Don't just guess. Look at the numbers and see what's actually working.
I like that. Okay, well, we've covered a ton of ground in this Etsy deep dive.
We sure have.
We've talked about the platform, the products, the SEO, the marketing, the business side of things. It's a lot.
It is a lot. But I think there's a bigger message here beyond all the technical stuff.
Oh, what's that?
I hope this deep dive has inspired people, shown them that Etsy is more than just an online marketplace. It's a community of creative people, a platform where you can really turn your passion into a business.
Yeah, it's about empowering people.
Exactly. And it's also a reminder that, we can choose to support small businesses and celebrate handcrafted goods.
I love that. Etsy is about more than just buying and selling. It's about supporting a certain way of doing things.
Exactly. It's about building a more human-centered economy.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage everyone listening to check out the links we've provided to the guide, the Etsy website, and all those other resources we talked about.
Yes. Go explore.
Whether you're an Etsy pro, just starting out, or just curious about Etsy, there's so much to discover.
It's an amazing platform.
All right, that's a wrap on our Etsy deep dive. Happy exploring, everyone.